What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Damian Serbu. We're talking about his book, Witch in the Wind. That book is available now. Such an enjoyable, lovely, fantastic conversation with Damian. I know I say that about all my guests, but honestly, this was one of my favorites. He's so easy to talk to, and I really enjoyed learning how his own personal experiences inspire his plots and what his characters go through. And we got off on some tangents just talking about relationships in general, being dog parents, all that good stuff. But I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Damien. Okay, so today we've got Damian Serbu. We're talking about Witch in the Wind. That book is available now. Damian, thanks for meeting with me today. I just finished it, and so it's fresh in my brain. I really liked meeting all your characters. I enjoyed the pirate adventure story, and I was rooting for the love story in it. And partially, hopefully, their hearts are getting broken, but it's okay. We'll try to be spoiler free for the most part. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Great. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So to get started, can you give like a summary of the books that people can follow along with the conversation?
Yeah, the summary of the book is essentially it takes place near the end of the Salem witch trials. Alexander Macbeth, who is the main character, his mother is accused of witchcraft. His parents both died. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's in the first chapter, so I don't think
Yeah,
it
sure.
ruins anything for anybody. And he has to learn to survive somehow, but he gets pursued by authorities in Salem and has to flee aboard a pirate ship. A lot of the adventure and action takes place as he's keeping away from Salem. However, before he left, he had fallen in love with a nobleman from Boston, and he's yearning for that connection and thinking about Crispin as he sails along and goes about his business.
Mm-hmm. Have that forbidden love, and on top of that, he's got to keep his skills, his abilities secret, and also unfortunately deal with his uncle. It was a lot. You threw a lot at him. You threw a lot at him.
Yes, poor guy. Yeah, I forgot to mention he's a
Can you
witch,
go into?
so that's a key component as well. His mother acted with him the power of a family witchcraft legacy. He has to learn about that. And
Yeah.
she was supposed to teach him, but she ends up dying before she really gets to do those lessons. So he's also having to train himself, which delays his leaving Salem. The first third of the book, I would say, takes place, fourth of the book takes place in Salem as he's learning his power, growing up, and just becoming more and more comfortable with protecting himself and forging his own path in the world from a mess of people having expectations on him, trying to exploit him, especially his uncle.
Yeah, because he was like, we meet him when he's 13 or 14,
Yeah, he's
I
pretty
think, at the
young.
beginning of the book. And then I think it's what, over a span, by the time the book ends, he's 20, right?
Yeah,
I
he's
think.
in his early 20s by the end of it.
Yeah, because I know, because like you did put like dates and stuff ish and like locations for the most part in the chapter headings, but after a while I stopped paying attention. So I'm like, oh, wait a second. Like, how old is he now? Because he grows, we see him grow more, like in the first quarter of the book, like how you said, the first quarter, the first third, and then throughout the rest of the story it takes place over like a few months, right? So yeah, so it was, once I got the gist of it, I was like, okay, he's growing up, he's teaching himself things, and he's learning the world, unfortunately, from his point of view, from his
Yeah, and the
situation.
other thing that's hard, I think, sometimes in when you go into the past, like time moved more slowly, if that makes sense. So his growth and
Hmm.
maturation and not getting out of, I think today it would be more of a story where people would think after a week or so of dealing with his abusive uncle, he'd run away or just get the hell out of there or something. And it was just a different world. So I think that beginning moves more slowly and his development feels slower because we're not
Yeah.
used to that.
Yeah. It depends on like how, how you want to grab the reader, and how, where you want to take it in terms of having him like the reader relate to him or understand his backstory, or like how much do you make it backstory versus we're following his backstory with him. So they're like, yeah, it depends on like how you want to feed that information to the reader and how you think that'll make the most impact. But yeah, I just remember we meet him when he's like an adolescent, becomes an orphan, and but he, right from the get-go, he understands like how the world is, how society feels about people like him, and he's got to unfortunately figure it out for himself and stay hush about it and all that stuff. But before we get carried away too much, I want to know about your
Yeah.
background. Can you go over, because you have a bunch of books published already, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So can you go into your background a little bit and what led you to release Witch in the Wind
Sure.
into the world?
Yeah, I have a vampire series out. There are 5 books in the vampire series set from as far back as the French Revolution up until contemporary stories. There's a family of vampires, and some of the characters repeat in the various books. I also have a young adult ghost story out, The Bachman Family Secret, that takes place in Nebraska with a young person who has to go back to his grandfather's funeral, and a legacy is revealed about a family of witches in his family and a ghost that is haunting the family homestead. Witch in the Wind came about. Not all of, but a lot of my books are a marriage between my other life, which is as a history professor. I have a PhD in history and teach college level history. And so sometimes I leak that world of history into my novel writing. And The Witch in the Wind is very much like that. So I was compelled to write it by a couple of things. I've long been fascinated with the Salem witch trials and the horror that happened there. So I've wanted to set something in that era, and that's related to even to this very current moment, the force of like people's religious belief and how they use it so often to oppress people and come after people. So
Yeah.
that early part of his story and the Puritan ministers coming after him is a reflection of that. And then I had taught a course, an honors course, that tried to look at different things from different perspectives and flip stereotypical narratives on their head. Just a quick example that is relevant today because everybody's running out to watch Wicked. We would watch The Wizard of Oz, the original movie, and then read Wicked and look at how Gregory Maguire turns the story on its head with Elphaba's background, and suddenly she's a heroine instead of the evil wicked witch of the West. But it was an interdisciplinary course, so we needed a history unit. So I taught a history of pirates, and we read a book about the history of pirates. So I became fascinated with pirates because, again, we have the stereotypical image of them as lawless, brutal, not following the norms and standards of society, and being these really scary individuals. And indeed, sometimes they could be that. And that's in my novel as well. But they were a little more complicated than that. I don't think most people realize that many of them were educated, that in a world of like monarchies and oppressive governments, a pirate ship was a very egalitarian place, a very democratic place. So I was just drawn to that story and thought, what if my character ended up on this pirate ship and what would that be like? And could I
Mm.
tell a history of pirates that was authentic and showed the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the ways that they operated? So that was the inspiration. And then most of my stories start as this little vague idea floating around in my head. And for a while, there isn't any like rhyme or reason to it until I start to envision an outline for it and put it to paper. And so what happened here was Alexander as a character was really appealing to me because I had never written somebody who had his amount of confidence. I was really pulled
Mm.
to him
Mm.
because he's just, even sometimes
Needs to
when
be a
he
little bit
shouldn't be,
cocky.
he's
Yeah.
very confident that he's right. And he's very bold about asserting himself and protecting himself. Again, a lot of my other characters haven't been that. So I was really wanting to write this character and bring him to life. And so it was about the time I was thinking about this Salem pirate thing, and then I wedded them together.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, because I've read pirate adventures before, and yeah, a lot of that is we'll get into the research too, but I imagine a lot of the stuff that you came up that was in your story, you've already been doing the research as like a history professor, or you already had the resources available. It was just a matter of like how you want to put them together. Other authors who have pirate based adventure stories, that was like a lot of they do mention the misconception and stuff and what they've read in old papers, and depending on the time period, depending on if it was like in Europe versus sailing in other parts of the world, yeah, there was like misconceptions, and there women try to pass off as men to live that life, to try to stay safe and just trying to, because they're escaping something
Yeah.
or whatever. And yeah, so I thought it was really cool because yeah, it is like the same. I've come across that before where the research definitely points out something different as to what maybe we're led to believe, even in present day, unless you're a history professor taking classes on it, or unless you take a deep interest in it. It's you just like a lot of people maybe just accept the general knowledge, the public knowledge that, or based on entertainment and whatnot. I thought it was cool. Like, I don't think I've ever read a story that combined that with. I think I read it like maybe once or twice where it combined it with a magical element. But yeah, it was cool that you. I just liked it. It was interesting because it was like this one guy, this cocky guy's kid, and he's this art. Again, spoiler territory, about with him and Crispin's mom. Anytime there was anything going on between them two, I was okay, what's gonna happen? I was like gearing up. I just love the drama. I was excited. I was like, Portia, what are you gonna do now, you silly woman? But yeah, it was like those conflicts, but then it's just the fact that he's a witch, and the reason that was his motivation for the sea was calling to him. That was his option, because he was gonna get in a lot of trouble if he didn't.
Yeah.
Like, and so I thought that was like a really cool way to like mesh those two themes, those two genres almost like together. I thought it was really cool how you did that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a that was a
Yeah.
lot of, and I think that's also very accurate to a lot of pirates were fleeing something. It wasn't uncommon.
Hmm.
That's what brought them to that moment. I think for most of them, it was either poverty or impressment into the Navy, and one way or another,
Yeah.
their lives were going to be risked. And I think for a lot of pirates, it was just, I got to risk my life at sea. I'd rather do it for my self gain than for some
Yeah.
king somewhere I don't really like.
Yeah, that you'd have some choice in the
Yes.
matter where, you still have a job on the ship. You still have a certain, not like a certain rank, but there's some level of understanding. And so yeah, you'd rather it's like this, or being told and being placed in a role, in a hierarchy, stuff like that, for, yeah, exactly, like fight for serving an organization or government entity that you're not all about, that you don't support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's so cool to pull in those, like the political, like the history, those motivations, stuff like
And
that.
particularly for Alexander, he fled the Puritans and the oppression and the expectations of where he grew up and everybody around him. So it really made sense in his case, especially to, he's not going to go find something that replicates that or that would make him feel that way. And I think that's his confidence. He
Yeah.
knows it's not just the ocean and sailing that calls to him, even though he attempts different things. It's really like it ends up being the pirates because they offer a different solution, a different way out of the mess.
Yeah. Like I mentioned this earlier with the research and stuff. I know, yeah, it's like in your background and you have access to the resources and stuff. Was there anything besides like your profession or what you already had access to? Was there anything else that you had to search for? Was there any did you approach it the same way as you do like your other titles that you've published? Was there anything like that you found fascinating or surprising that you learned, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think if I delve into history, whether it's set during the French Revolution, or in this case, the early 1700s with the pirates. Because of being a historian, I really want to be accurate. And I know that sounds Looney Tune because at the same time, like all of a sudden there's a vampire, they're like casting spells
Yeah.
all over the place. So obviously I'm messing around with everything in that regard. But in terms of like the history, the setting, the actions, the dating of everything, I really want to be as accurate as possible. My mother accused me once, she was reading my first vampire novel, which is set during the Revolution, and she accused me of being sneaky and making her learn history because she doesn't really like
Yeah.
history. So she likes the novel.
But her son turned out to be a
I
historian, so
know, I know. Well, that was from my father. She blames my dad for that side of my
yeah.
interest. So that was true with the,
She still married him. I don't know.
I
Like,
know, right? It's opposites attract sometimes, I guess.
there you
So,
go. There you go.
yeah, so the history of the pirates is very accurate, and I was called to that. So one of the things that happens with my research is I actually have to be careful if I'm doing it for a novel. I can go down rabbit holes and all of a sudden
Oh
feel
yeah.
like, oh, I've got to read 10,000 pirate histories so I really get it accurate. So one thing, I was double checking sources, and in particular, as I was researching, I came to you could probably tell from what I was saying, I admired the pirates. But then there's a scene in the novel where the pirate captain has to punish somebody. And I had read this, so it was in my mind, but in preparation to write those scenes where people get in trouble with the pirates, I had to go back and look at, well, what did they do to punish people? And it's dark. That part of
Yeah.
pirate history is really dark, and this is not okay. So, and reading about, and then in my mind, if I was reading this, let's say for class or as a historian, sometimes I just skim over that and think, oh, that's nasty. And the knowledge bank would be, okay, pirates can be really cruel when they want to punish somebody. And that's
Sure.
what I needed to know in that regard. But if I'm going to write about it, I had to like be more intimate with it. Like I had to know the details. Well, what would happen if you tie a rope around somebody's head and then get a stick and get it tighter? And it's that is like gruesome stuff. So I think that was like that hit home as the counterbalance to, oh, they were democratic, so they were so nice to each other and everything. It's like this is like a different era. This is like really nasty stuff. So I it was like watching a horror film where it's coming, where you're like,
Mm,
oh, I should look away, but I want to know what this is, and then I had to write
yeah.
about it. So yeah, that was a fascinating journey.
Yeah, I imagine. It's almost like a morbid curiosity, but
Yes.
I love your commentary where you're like, if it was like if it was like for professional or academic purposes, you just like gloss over that. But then for your writing, you have to get intimate with it. You have to become super familiar with it so that you can write it authentically. I'm like, that's hilarious. Because I don't know. I just think maybe I just think you're just like I imagine you writing, you're just like, oh shit, like now I gotta
Yeah.
I gotta get into this now. And you're like, well, it's the pain of it, the pain of the writing. Because I joke around with other authors is asking about the research. I'm like, is your Google search history questionable? And that probably would have been up there. What happens if you tie a rope
Right.
around somebody's head? Or I don't know how you would enter that in a Google search, but it's like an
Right.
example of trying to search for something, how that would, almost like how long does it take for someone to die of suffocation? That's a dark detail to seek out, but it's probably, if you're writing like a suspense or a thriller or something like that, that's like about a crime fiction novel, like something as innocent, not innocent as that. It's just it's something that you would need to, if that's the route you're trying to go, however detailed you want to
Yeah.
go, like that's something that you,
My
yeah,
husband,
it's so funny. I imagine so many authors are like
I know.
that.
Well, yeah, my husband has asked a few times with the search results if he's looking something up and he just peers at it. He'll be like, I'm going to assume that you're looking up poisons because of your writing and not for some other reason. I'm like, yeah, it was just the writing.
Yeah, honey, come on, don't worry, you're safe.
There's no arsenic in the drink I just made you.
No, you're safe. This is for someone else. Just don't say anything. I know. I think it was a quarantine conversation, I would say, between my husband and I was just like, if I murdered someone, would you turn me in? And he's, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If you did something wrong, I'm like, honey, you're not my ride or die then. And he was like, what do you mean? And then my cousins, I brought it up to him. My cousins, okay, it's illegal for you to ask a spouse to rat out a suspect. So if you do it, you're a snitch. Like, what? And then I think I put like a Facebook post on it and I had everybody commenting, and some of my homegirls, like my college friends, like my the people who stood up at my wedding, they were like, Megan, it's all right. I watch enough SVU. Just give me a call. I'm like, Tony, this is what a ride or die looks like. That's what I'm talking.
It's
So no, it's funny. It's funny to joke about that because I don't know. I always joke too. I openly tell people like I openly tell my husband I'm gonna murder you when he's just he just frustrates me so much. Where it is something simple as he's asking me a question that I already answered 12 minutes ago, and then he's asking again, and I'm like, he just likes to be very thorough, and I'm like, I answered this for you. I'm gonna murder you. Like, and so it's just like an example of that. I think so. An example also, I'm gonna go off on a tangent, or we're gonna go all over the place. So We have two little boys. One of them's in second grade, and he went to they're doing like a little fundraiser. Like they have a little, I don't know, it's called like a penguin shop. They got like a little shop where the students can go and take money, and they can go buy presents like for their, and it's like as low as 25 cents. They can buy presents for loved ones. He wanted to buy presents for everybody, so we're like, okay, we're trying to list it out. We're trying to restrict him per person. Don't spend more than $2 on a person because he's got 17 people he wants to buy presents for. So we're like, and he gets an allowance. He gets because he does chores, so he gets an allowance, so he can use his own money. And we're like, okay, trying to figure out. And they were doing that. There was an option for a parent to come and help them out today. So that's what my husband was doing. And for some of the content that I try to do like drink videos. And I actually matched up a cocktail recipe based on The Witch, that movie, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna get in the witchy spirit. I'm gonna get in the witchy vibe. That's what I'm drinking right now. So I was just doing that before signing on. But he came down here being like in the middle of recording my video. He's, wait, did you start your interview yet? I'm like, I'm doing the drink video. And he was like, okay, so Logan spent $36 today. I'm like, I literally have like minutes before I have to sign on for the scheduled interview. I'm like, is this conversation important right now? Can you not wait until 5 o'clock? I'm like, that's an example of where I'm like, he's, I just wanted to get off of my brain. I just didn't want to forget. And I'm like, okay, what? I'm like, you knew about this because he knows for the most part my schedule. And he even helped me shop for ingredients for my drink that I was doing. And so yeah, that's an example of where I'm like,
Yeah, I get it.
it's like, so- yeah, this turned into like from Google search history to like me murdering my husband. But
Well,
anyways,
now you've
um,
recorded it, so they'll have that record.
hey, but I have power over the
Yeah,
okay,
make sure
so
that
that's
if he ends up dead tonight, make sure to get back in here and excise all of this conversation.
I know, right? So off of the research, maybe like tapping onto that because I alluded to it earlier. Since you have other titles that you've written and published, did this Witch in the Wind, did I just want to explore if your experience publishing this one, was it different than your previous titles? Did you do anything different? Did you approach it the same way? Any big lessons learned, stuff like
Yeah,
that?
I don't. This one was actually one of the most, one of the smoothest, I would say, from initial writing to publication. Probably born mostly just from experience at this point. I'm with the same
Mm,
publisher now for 8 different novels, and I have one of the greatest editors I've ever had before there. So she and
nice.
I really connect. It's funny, she wasn't my first editor there, and then I was passed on to her when that editor wasn't there anymore. And she is not like a big horror fan. So suddenly she has like a speculative
Mm,
fiction horror author. And so we've had funny conversations about that because she's one time she just sent me an email and she said, I'm in the middle of editing. This isn't anything for you to answer, but I just want you to know in the future, I need you to stop killing off main characters in your novel. So yeah, that was funny because it's like she's not used to that. She does a lot of romance, and romance novels not supposed to
okay.
have characters
Yeah.
left and right.
Oh,
So no,
no. There's definitely a formula.
yeah, yeah, exactly, and it doesn't involve a lot of death and pirates throwing each other overboard and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
this was pretty smooth, I would say, in terms of learning experiences in my craft. I suppose what I felt best about was that I have refined my writing over time. So with the editing process, this time wasn't quite as intense as it used to be. The biggest thing I had to knock out of myself was obviously academic writing is radically different. Oh, sorry. Academic writing is radically different. That's the
It's okay.
dogs. Yeah.
I had to close the doors for my dog to stay out. It's all right.
I
He
know
just
it's
wanted
the
to say
tension
hi,
between
right?
like being in a closet somewhere where they won't interrupt and then
Yeah.
having them here. And of course, they've been good all day, but now they're like on high alert. Oh, there might be pirates.
Like, why are you talking so much? What's going
Yeah,
on?
okay. Daddy might be home any minute. I have to be on high alert. Yeah, so this time was just it's been like my academic writing radically different than when you're writing a novel, obviously. So I had to like tone that down. And so it was rewarding this time to know that I've gained better skill at doing that as I'm writing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, especially if your academic background has helped you prepare a little bit for the creative writing
Yeah, yeah.
aspect of it. Yeah. Or maybe it can be like, I don't know, you have to get out of that bubble. You have to get out of that, like, your habits and brand,
It's
but
akin
yeah.
to, now people will disagree with me here, but if you ever read Melville's Moby Dick, to me it's a
Hmm.
good example of what I tried not to do, because like his super intense detailed descriptions of whale blubber and whaling were super accurate, and it is part of the story, but it's like way overboard. And I think early
Yeah.
that's what I would end up doing. Like I'm thinking, oh, I send a character. Okay, so in The Vampire's Angel, which is the first vampire book during the French Revolution, one of the characters ends up at the beheading of Louis XVI. So I wanted it to be super accurate. Like in the first draft of it, like the whole history of that moment and everything I read and everything is like this really thick part of it. And you realize, yeah, that's like a history lesson in the middle of your novel. You got to cut some of that crap out because nobody wants to read that. If they want to read a history of the French Revolution, they'll go read a fucking history of the revolution, not a
Yeah.
vampire novel about gay vampires during this. So I've learned to tone that down.
That's I know because I could see that temptation of where you're like, no, this is super relevant, and you're
Yeah.
like, it's like it does. It reminds me of a an author I interviewed where she was writing sports romance. She's like into sports, like she's always been into sports, but she was like had a balance including. She's like, people who read sports romance don't care about sports. So I had to like, she had to do the same thing. Like she had to tone it down. Like
Yeah.
she had to decide like what, cause yeah, like she would have been a lifelong fan of her local teams and stuff like that. So she had to learn that balance of not to, like you said, like you have to engage the reader. You can't like slow down the pace so much. You can't bore them,
Yeah.
have to gloss over because if it's too much like info dumping them. Like you said, that's not what they're here.
And the
That's,
problem is,
you know.
part of your mind is like, oh my God, I spent hours researching this and knowing about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like one
Oh.
sentence in the freaking book. That's fine.
That's so common.
Yeah.
That's so common. And what I speak to authors about, I think another one she was researching, she did historical fiction and she fell down a rabbit hole of searching like what makeup was like in the 60s. And it was like two sentences in the book. And I was like, that's hilarious. I'm like, but I could see it so easily turning out that way where you have like a bunch of post-it notes or tabs open and then it's just no, that's it. That's all I'm gonna say about it.
I know. Or sometimes that happens, like it's even worse. Like you do all this research and then you realize, yeah, this doesn't fit at all. I'm never going to use it. I
Oh.
try to convince myself this is true, but I just say, you learned from it. It's okay. You gain knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah, nobody else learns it. That was the whole point.
right. Okay, it was not time wasted, damn it. It was informative. I learned something.
Like doing a Jedi mind trick on myself. No, you learned and you're
Yeah.
fine. It's okay.
Yep. Yep, 100%. Oh God, that's so funny. So you so there's potentially like content or like trigger warning themes in the
Mhm.
book, like we touched on before. How do you like navigate those dark themes? I guess with the subject matter in general, it sets the tone, but I imagine did you have to get you personally for your own mental health, like you have to navigate because there's death and like suicide
Mhm.
and the murder and there's just like homophobia and religious persecution, things like that. How did you like navigate those themes? And I just want to explore how you had to touch upon it, but it was like so integral to the plot and stuff like that.
Yeah, I personally don't tend to be triggered by things like that in literature in my writing, or in what I'm reading. So I think that helps me just go with the story. And personally, I have a relatively dark view of humanity. Humans and people are capable of doing really awful things to each other. And at the same time, there's an amazing human spirit to overcome that. And people who decide for themselves, well, I'm not going to be that. So I think I throw my characters into that world. And so it's going to be natural that they confront these vile things that are all around us and that were all around us in the past. And my interest then is digging into how do they overcome that? How do they sustain themselves in the face of that evil? And who are the people and where are they that try to change that narrative or make it better. The first mate,
Mm,
one of the kind of speaking to that, the first mate on the ship, and talk about not wanting to give
mm,
spoilers away, but Spittle is the character's name. And I think Spittle kind of embodies that spirit of in the pirate world, in some of the infighting and intrigue on this ship, Spittle just determined to make the pirate world the best pirate world it could be, and has a moral, ethical grounding that's a little bit different from some of the other pirates. So I think that's one of the ways I cope with it, by the way, getting myself
mm.
into an answer to your question, is finding those
Yeah.
characters that are seeking a different path. And again, with Alexander, it was a question of those elements can destroy somebody and have destroyed people. So, what does Alexander do differently, or how is it that he sees the world and he's not going to let it destroy him that way? Yeah, writing speculative fiction and horror in general, actually, I think is a window into humanity, into the soul, into what terrifies us. That's at the heart of it. I belong to the Horror Writers Association and participate in a lot of Chicagoland chapter events and stuff. And my stuff isn't as dark as some of their stuff. But one
Yeah.
of the things that I think people miss in horror and magic and vampires and witches and stuff is that it can really speak to the human condition. Horror works as a genre, or putting magic with the pirates works in only insofar as you invest yourself in the characters and their survival and their overcoming of the odds, or what's happening to them. I hear this all the
Yeah.
time, like Stephen King, who, like, I like
Mm,
Stephen King. I'm not like a superhero fan of his, but I like him. But one of the things I think people don't understand about him so often is he creates brilliant characters. And long before you confront like the nasty monsters and stuff, you feel for the character, which is why you care about the whole book in the first place. So I think that helps with, like, the
yeah.
darkness and stuff for me. Is it's, oh, this is scary and this is awful for him, but how is he going to confront it? How is he going to fight it? And what lifelines does he have to center himself so he doesn't succumb to the darkness?
I love that answer because I ask authors that when they've got like a potentially triggering themes that like it needs a warning for some readers. And a lot of them are like, what doesn't bother me? I didn't really have trouble. It was just like part of the story. But I love how you were like, I love your answer of I use my characters to explore that. And I really like Spittle's character, friendship with
I do
Alexander, because
too.
I was like, oh, I think when I was like reading the book, I just remember it was like, yeah, Alexander's a little cocky, and of course, he's flawed as a character. Like we readers, like I love flawed characters. Like he's definitely got stuff to work on. But I was like, I want to be his
Yes.
friend. I want him to look out for me. And so I love that you use your characters to navigate those potentially troublesome issues where because it was like he had conversations with Crispin's mother earlier because regarding their forbidden love, their relationship, where she was just like, and I'm sure like in the like how you mentioned before, I think what just your experience growing up and as with your sexual identity, I'm sure like that's part of the reason why you have more of a realistic view of society, where or I don't want to say cynical, but it's like it could be arguably like how you said dark expectations, but I'm like that could be arguably like
Mhm.
realistic versus rose-colored glasses. And I grew up straight, white, female. My experience, but I appreciate reading books like yours where I can get a peek into perspectives that aren't like my own. And so I appreciate how your experiences and other author experiences just seep into the page that way and are, become part of that because it's not only is he a witch, but he's a homosexual. He's against so much, and but it's important, I think, for those groups to be represented 100%. And so yeah, no, I appreciated how you use your characters to navigate that type of thing. And I liked Spittle a lot. I did like Alexander. I was rooting for him. I was rooting for his love story. I felt so bad for him at certain points. And Henry and Crispin, I was just like, oh God.
I know.
I was like, towards the end of the book, I was like, oh, poor guy. I was like, let's. But
There is
it
that
was
love
just like part of the
triangle.
like
What's interesting.
the engagement of
Yeah, and
it.
without, okay, no spoiler here because this is at the end, but there's that love triangle and it gets resolved a particular way at the end. And it's really fun when people have read it. And some people like how it resolved, And some people were rooting for the one who didn't win out to have won.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it's
Don't mind me. I'm gonna replenish my drink while we're
that's
chatting.
all right.
I'm trying to like cause so I'll show you real quick. It's Cocktails from the Crypt, and it's a bunch of cocktail recipes based on like horror movies.
That is
And it's funny because I'm not
fabulous.
like, yeah, oh, I love it. I
I'm gonna
love it.
get
I'm a
that.
sucker for purple. Yeah, so it's by Kimberly Elizabeth and Jonathan Dehan. They actually do Nightmare on Film Street podcast. Nightmare on Film Street. That's a podcast, and those are the two people who came up with this. And it's really cool. Okay, I'll do a little mini whatever here. I've done a couple of recipes from this because I try to like come up with more content to do like book themed or whatever entertainment themed drinks.
Oh,
And then
that's
there's like the
cool.
rest. So I grabbed this recipe from that. It was based on The Witch, which I've never seen, but it's actually on my list because because I don't really horror is not my go-to, or I need to have a certain like I need to be in the mood for it. I need to like but The Witch, I think it was like with Anya Taylor-Joy. It's from like almost 10 years ago. I remember it's on my list, but I know that like you have to have a certain I don't know, at least for me. But it's funny because when I read horror, I'm not as turned off. But if like when it comes to watching horror movies, I'm like I don't know, I just don't like to be scared.
I'm that way too, and it's weird because like as horror authors, when we go out, people are always asking us about movies and what movies we like and which ones are influential. And I'm like, I watch them. Some of
Yeah.
them I enjoy, but I'm a lot like you. I have to be in the right mood to go see a movie. And then if I'm with my husband,
Yeah.
he's super cynical and doesn't really like horror movies. So I got to be, and it's not because he's scared by them, but I forget which one of us. We were in a movie theater and it wasn't a very good horror movie. It was just a horror movie. And we got done, and the movie theater is totally quiet. And all of a sudden, really loud, he goes, "That was the dumbest fucking movie I have ever sat through." So we don't do a lot of horror movies because he has this like visceral reaction to like hate. Yeah.
Oh my God. Was it part of you? I don't know how long you guys have been together, but it was part of you waiting for it,
Oh
or
yeah. No,
like
I always
you
had
were
to
were
know.
there
And
people
we
still
were
in the
with
theater too?
Yeah, we were with two really good friends, so I felt like, oh, some of it is he's acting for them as well. And yeah, I
Okay,
knew what.
sure.
Yeah, no,
He was just the energy, whatever, yeah.
sometime we watched one recently, and right after it was over, during the credits, I just started laughing. And it was not a funny movie. And so finally, what could possibly be funny? And I said, I'm just waiting and anticipating your reaction to this because I know it's not going to be good.
That's hilarious. I guess it for me if it's like we recently watched, I think it was Annabelle. It was like a vampire ballerina. It's really recent. It came out within the last year, but we're like, because my husband and I, after the kids go to bed, we watch our shows or we watch a movie. We just chill, enjoy our time to ourselves, stay up too late, whatever. And so we'll watch movies and stuff. And that was like one of the movies that, but if it's marketed as, it's yeah, it's horror, but it's comedic, or it depends on the vibe. Where I was like, yeah, let's watch this. But in general, it's with him. Speaking of husband commentary, I say this all the time. He's one that can see it coming, like predict the twist or can predict connections that aren't. He'll just be like, oh, they're gonna do this, or oh, it's gonna be the sister, or oh, it's and then sure enough, he's right. And I'm just like, can you just go into a focus group or go into a writer's room and tell them, because it's so much like he sees it coming, and I'm not like that at all. Where I've learned I'm okay with that. Where like that's my entertainment consumption experience. I don't always see the twist coming. I don't always predict this person's role into this thing. And so I don't mind. That's my experience, and I don't have a problem with that. But it's annoying when you got someone else like on the couch next to you being like, "Oh yeah, but it's this." But then like when he's wrong, I'm just like, "Yes."
Paul's like that too.
It's like,
Because I'll be like
yeah.
reacting, and he'd be like, "You didn't know that?" I'm like, no, I didn't see that coming at all. That's funny. Your drinks
Yeah.
like related to movies is fun because there's a local group here, Equality Downers Grove, that does LGBT education and stuff in my local community. One of the things we do every year is we sponsor a community book reading. So last year we
Okay.
read T.J. Klune's House in the Cerulean Sea, which is a fabulous novel. Very
Oh,
creative and just fun.
yeah. I've heard a lot about that when it came out. Yeah.
And so the last, we did a library event and we had some other book discussions, but the last event was a party to celebrate it. So one of the local restaurants even created a special drink for it. And it was like, I don't know what was
Oh,
in
so
it, but
fun.
it was like a blue drink and it was sweet and tasty. It was so good. So it's fun to have drinks.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. Just a few more questions. So, what were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I sometimes with the magic or the spirit, I can see. So there's a particular pirate on board Beast who's Alexander's arch enemy as a pirate. And sometimes I can see in my head almost like the movie scene of what Beast is doing and what it looks like. And it can challenge me quite a bit to get that onto paper then. If it's just the story and it's flowing and it's a natural part of it, I usually don't have problems with it. But sometimes
Mm.
when it's in my mind it's very visual, transferring that onto the paper so that the reader's going to also see that can be difficult. And this one had a few things like that with the magic and everything. There's another scene where another pirate ship is attacking them and there's a witch on board that pirate ship, and giving the reader that view of Alexander as a witch confronting this other witch, and their bodies are on the ships but they're having this fight with the wind and everything. That can be hard to write succinctly and clearly so that people really see it.
That's a common thing where like authors wish they had like a camera to just show them and then write it because it's like I know the action. It's like action
Yes, it is.
sequences. I think
It
that's really
is. Yeah.
common. Yeah.
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 And the fun parts to write, I think, were Alexander's just exploration of the world, his ability to find for himself the life that he wanted to lead. And through those ups and downs, not giving up and persevering with it and feeling like he could make it, that he was going to use his magic, his
Mm.
knowledge, and his confidence to because you talked about like his tension with Portia Crispin's mom, who's nobility, super powerful, super rich, and I liked that never really intimidated him too much. That was fun. So those passages when he was doing that kind of thing, I found those pretty easy to write and just a joy to write too.
Did you? You don't have to answer it, but I'm curious. Is that did that come from some maybe personal experience of like any previous boyfriends or lovers that you had to deal with their parents or stuff like that? Or it's like maybe just from, or it's like people in your community who have dealt with that, you
Yeah,
know?
I think it was more that. I never had, like, I should preface this, by the way, because there's a lot of moms in this book that die. And so I love my mother dearly. And I have an absolutely amazing mother in law who is nothing like that.
Mm.
But yeah, I think I did feel tension because Paul and I started dating, we were pretty young. And so the tension wasn't about me, but it was just coming to terms with Paul being gay and what's that going to mean and who's coming into the picture. So I think some of it is that, but more it's just that world out there where people just don't like it and they want to repress it and they want to stamp on it. So I think she was
Not
with that kind
necessarily,
of
yeah, not necessarily experiencing that with like direct family
right.
members, but
And
yeah,
having
I
people
know.
that did
Yeah,
experience that. I have
yeah.
one friend who, yeah, had a hard time. He's in a relationship. They've been in a relationship a long time. They love each other, but it wasn't always easy because the other family was sometimes like, oh, this isn't okay. And yeah, it was writing that experience that people have had.
Yeah, and I think it was important too because it can like parallel with what readers, like I said earlier, there's those stories that need to be represented, and I think definitely that aspect of it can totally resonate with people from that
Yeah.
community who are like not they're like they're just like is they're on that journey. I don't want to use any terms that are going to be offensive, but because it's I don't know I like I said I grown up with one experience, but I never really had a problem. I've never grown up in an environment where I got the idea that was not okay. My understanding is just I just happened to fall in love with a
Yeah.
man. That's as simple as it is. If I fall in love with a woman, then I guess that's the label. But it's whatever your heart, your feelings, your sexual attraction is. It's I don't like from my perspective. It's yeah, I find women attractive, but I don't think I could ever like see it on that level. It's so different, and it's you have to respect and appreciate that difference in terms of like how that people from that community what they have to
And
go
the
through.
novel, I think Crispin is really a manifestation of what that can do to somebody, because Alexander is pretty comfortable with himself and who he is
Yeah.
and what it means. But Crispin is,
He puts the moves on
I
him.
know he
He
does,
does not
totally.
hesitate. I was like, it happens early in the book where he's just like acting on his like attraction, and I was like,
I
okay,
know.
okay,
Like
Alexander.
when he meets Henri, who's like a pirate captain and has got a weapon, and he's just, yeah, I'm going for it. Like, oh.
Yeah,
But Crispin, on the other hand, he feels that people don't like it. He feels the pressure his mother is placing on him to squash it and not be that. So he
and that's like also kind of
personifies that
his
tension,
place
that
in
hardship, that
yeah,
I feel this and I know this is who I am, but I also know it displeases people, and he wants to please people and follow rules and order.
yeah. He's trying to fit in. He's got his duty. He's trying to no 100% where he's trying to follow the rules and he's trying to fit in, but then Alexander's he's there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with
And I
no
think Alexander
like
is his window into that world, like trying to liberate him to follow that.
and yeah, and spoiler free, just the ending and what the grand gestures and the culmination and how your characters find each other and what happens from that. It's just God. It was like all leading up to that, and I was just okay, okay come on, like what? And then it was so romantic and so I was rooting for them. I was rooting for them, but also anticipating, oh God, somebody's gonna get their heart
I
broken.
know.
Like what?
I know that's one of the,
Like,
yeah, tragedies of the whole thing. Huh?
yeah, which is again a human. It's a realistic situation. It's a
It
human
is.
condition. Even though maybe people of our age haven't had to like readers maybe haven't had to deal with love triangle on a pirate ship in Salem,
Right.
Massachusetts, but it's something that people could relate to. Damien, where can we find you online and on social
Yeah,
media?
probably the easiest one is damianserbu.com. That's my website. I do link to Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky from there. So I do social media posting and stuff, but my website kind of has the headquarters for finding those things, also links to where you can get my books.
Yeah. Perfect, perfect. I always include the links on the show notes and stuff like that. But that's pretty much what it is. Go to my website, you find everything. What is next for you? Are you working on anything that you can talk
Yeah,
about?
I don't have any like grand secrets or publisher that's don't tell anybody. I just finished a young adult novel. No, I should preface with who knows if somebody will publish it or not, but I just finished a young adult novel that is about an alien invasion, and so there's spaceships and things. I grew up a huge Star Wars fan, and my brother has scolded me a number of times, like, "Why don't you write about space? We loved space when we were growing up," and it just,
Like sci-fi,
yeah, and
yeah.
it had just never called to me very much. But suddenly there was this idea for a story set with this alien invasion and then a mystery about who are they and what's going on. I just finished that. And then I've been writing, I just started a new book that's set in the future and the world is destroyed. And there's this one particular character, he's a sorcerer and he has magical power, but he hates humanity and he thinks it's evil and kind of dire. I'm in the early stages of that, but that's been interesting because he's the idea for the novel and the outline for it has been in the works for a while. But the last couple of weeks and living in America has really brought out for me this need to write this like dark view of humans and what's going on, and it's been a good outlet for that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just you're feeling the tone where it seems like it's the right
Yeah,
time and for you to be a little bit therapeutic
it
about it,
is.
right?
Yeah,
Like
it's very much.
you're just like fuck everyone. Like
Exactly that. That's the nice thing about being a novelist and particularly a horror writer. If you're feeling that pent up aggression, you just go kill people. We laugh and like
yep.
horror writers when we get together, it's so funny because they're the nicest people I have ever been around. Just charming,
Yeah.
wonderful, like people. And there, at least in our group, there is not like a lot of catty infighting or, oh, if I'm around you, you'll take my readers or whatever. And we all joke it's because we put all of our aggression and anger into the pages so we can just be normal otherwise.
Yeah, like your cynicism and your views and like how dark you want to be. I agree. I have interviewed Daniel Kraus. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
familiar
he's
with
a
his
member
work.
of, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I've interviewed him like 5 times. So you can next time you guys have a meeting, you be like, "Oh yeah, I talked with Megan and Cantina
I
Book
will.
Club." I've interviewed him like 5 times and it's really funny. I'm like, believe it or not, this is your fifth time me interviewing you. He's like, "Do I get a jacket? What?"
That's funny because Daniel,
He's like you just got to co-host the show now. Like
I
what?
know, and he's like a perfect example of our group because Daniel's like big
He's
time.
seriously so nice.
Like if
Yeah.
you like, he is so nice, and he's just
And he's
so
so
down to
like
earth.
understanding and just it's just in the world in general. Like he's an ally for everything and he will change. It's so funny. I'm like, and I tell people that no, he's like, he writes some fucked up shit,
Yes, he is.
but he's like this, like, whenever I talk to him, he's like the
I
sweetest dude.
know.
Like,
Yes.
he is so fun to talk to. It's so awesome. And I went to the Midwest Mystery Conference that took place about a month ago because I work with K Publicity and they were like throwing it, and that's who he works with a lot. And I was like, and I go to him, I was like, he recognized me right away. He was like,
Aw.
hey, and I was like, yeah. I was like, I already have all your books and all your signings. I'm like, I just want a picture. So he's, yeah, that's fine. Like, it was so funny, but absolutely, it was really funny because one of the books that he wrote was like the Teddy saga,
Yes,
and it's middle
I
grade.
know.
And I told him when I interviewed him about it, I was like, sir, where do you get off writing some fucked up shit for middle schoolers? And he was just like, if they don't like it, they can put it down. They don't have to read it. I was like, true.
It's true.
Okay.
I know.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. I've enjoyed it. It's fun.
So Damian Serbu, Witch in the Wind, that book is available now. Thank you so much for meeting with me, for being patient with me rambling on and all of our stories and tangents and for getting deep into this story. I recommend it for people who like the pirate adventures, who appreciate the romance. Be warned that it is spicy. It's got the steamy scenes galore. And also like witch romantasy, I guess I would say. Adult romantasy. I think that covers it all.
Good.
So
Yes.
thank you so much. When and if you're writing and publishing your next work, feel free to come back. I'd love to chat with
I
you
will.
again.
This was fun.
And there you go. That was Damian Serbu talking about Witch in the Wind. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book online and on social media. While you're finding your favorite authors online and checking out their work, please go and find Cantina Book Club, and give me a follow and a like and all that good stuff so that you could stay up to date on upcoming interviews and as well as book reviews and book releases that might be coming out soon. If you need book recommendations, check out cantinabookclub.com. I'm always releasing book reviews. If you need a little bit of more in-depth, information on when you're looking for your next read, if you can, go and hop on over to Amazon and Goodreads, wherever you leave your book reviews, and rate and review your favorite authors. It really does help them out, along with pre-orders and book orders in general. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.